And a hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 194 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Thursday evening with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So when you're young and things happen in your life, unexpected, probably bad, there is an instinct to feel as if what is happening to you is unique. It's a unique thing. This doesn't happen to other people, just me. It's the sort of way that our brains work when we're young. In my case, when I was very young. And as I've gotten older, I understand that what I thought was unique was only unique to me. But I experienced a lot of cataclysmic events that are universal. When I was 17, when I was 18, I didn't realize, hey, you know how many people go through this? You're not alone on this, pal. And there's nothing wrong with that. There is a bit of comfort when you realize, hey, this isn't so unusual. It sucks, but I'm not the only one who goes through this, has gone through this, will go through this. Age sometimes gives you these perspectives that you didn't have. And there are events which took place when I was younger. If you run the same thing now, it's not even going to make a ripple. But when I was a kid, as Michael Stipe famously shouted, it's the end of the world as we know it. Well, then he said, I feel fine, but I didn't feel fine. There are events that would have a greater effect on me now that barely made a ripple then, mostly because I was an immature punk. And as I say, vice versa. So what I'm going to do, rather than just talk about movies 100% of the time or talk about working out, I want to give you a little bit more of a window into my thinking, how it has evolved over time. And in some cases hasn't necessarily evolved that much, but my worldview is entirely different than it was. So I'm going to talk about a particular year of my life, and I might come back to this year again. But there are, as someone who is now 50, there are certain years which brought enormous changes. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes ugly. But one such year that had enormous, cataclysmic, decades later still reverberating effects, 1992. The year I graduated from Massapequa High School. Now, I turned 18 December 29, 1991. I was born December 29, 1973. But the year 1992 saw levels of upheaval, levels of discontent, of sadness, of anger, of hopelessness. I had just been a kid. This was all new territory. I had already absorbed an enormous amount of failure, at least my estimation I had. Other people say, no, you're doing okay. You could use a better, maybe attitude adjustment, but you're not doing as terrible as you could be. You got a roof over your head. You got a father who makes a good living. You got a mother who's got a good job. You don't have it as bad as you think, kiddo. Well, that was at the beginning of 1992. That would have been right maybe in the first part of January of 1992, but very soon that was not going to be correct anymore. There were a lot of things going on at once. Some of them I had a little bit of control over, and then there were forces well beyond my ability to exert any level of control. So I'll start with the most immediate. Towards the end of 1991, I had never been out on a date. I was 17 and, as I say, turned 18, 12/29/92. Dad took me out to a restaurant in the city, right around the corner from his old office, which was by the Daily News building, La Maison Japonaise. It was a French-Japanese hybrid, fusion. They didn't call it fusion in December of 1991. It was just a restaurant that was French and Japanese. Like, we were a decade away from the word fusion being applied to restaurants, at least to my memory of. But the most important thing that was going on, I thought, in my life, as 91 clicked to 92, I had a crush. I'd never been out on a date. I had kissed 2 different girls. Ooh. First one, I was 14, summer of 88, not a good summer. Not for that reason, just not a good summer. The Yankees looked like they were going to make a charge, and they flamed out, as they often did in that decade. And then the infamous trip to Binghamton, New York, when I was in 11th grade. The bowling trip, when I got to bowl in the state finals and just absolutely punted the opportunity. I was just horrendous. I would bowl better now if you stuck me in, staggering around on the lanes at age 50. I would have done better than that little punk that I was, who just started to get aggravated and then couldn't do anything right. Oh, my thumb blew up. Shut up, piece of shit. Boy, I was insufferable, and I knew I was insufferable. I just didn't want to change. I guess I don't want to change. I like who I am. I like who you are too, I had no social life, and my perception was I had no means with which to shift that. I just thought, this is how it's got to be, But I had a crush on a classmate. And she seemed like a regular, kind of normal person, if that is really a thing. But she seemed as if maybe on the same wavelength as me. Somebody who was into sports, somebody who was into movies and had some idea of pop culture of the day. There did appear to be some common interests. But even though I was seeing my second of 4 therapists, second of 3, excuse me. Dr. Elkin, what a great guy. And I'm being serious, Elkin was awesome. He lived in the area of Massapequa. He was next door to Seinfeld's parents. Pretty good, Bar Harbor area. I had social anxiety disorder. Unfortunately, fear defined my behavior and or lack of behavior, because I was always petrified. I was always scared. Sometimes you can know what to do and your body limits you. You need reps, you need practice. Well, I didn't really have time. I had a crush, and there was a limited time frame. 1992 is not later in the decade when everybody had email. There was going to come a point in my senior year where the object of my desire was not going to exist anymore. She was not going to be in my sphere. And unless we somehow swapped phone numbers, which would indicate that I was at some point going to have to say, hey, how you doing? I was going to have to actually interact. Person to person. Big problem. Social anxiety disorder caused me to freeze and be unable to interact. Forget properly, unable to interact, period. Start shaking, almost going into convulsions. The anxiety was so bad it triggered panic attacks. So all that was going on, and I was attempting still, despite the brick wall of my mental state and the fact that my body chemistry was not working properly. I was having a nervous reaction as though my life was in danger, when all I wanted to do was smile and say, hey, that's all. There wasn't going to be any chess match here or any kind of grandstanding of I'm going to ask her out. No, you got to say hello first. Only in the movies can you stumble over somebody or knock someone's groceries over and then you end up in bed 20 minutes later. Yeah, the movie Contact. All-time great moments watching a movie with my dad. We were at Woodbury, what used to be called the Cinema 150, the Syosset, which is now the Equinox Gym. We're watching the movie Contact. And here's young Matthew McConaughey meets Jodie Foster, who was still in her early 30s at the time. And Jodie got an early start in the movie business. She was 12 when she shot Taxi Driver, about 20 years before Contact. So they meet Jodie Foster as this researcher, this scientist, Ellie Arroway, great name, Carl Sagan, that's the name of the main character in that book. And Palmer Joss, another great name, the character that Matthew McConaughey plays. They meet. There's a little normal conversation, and all of a sudden there's a cut, and they just had sex. And I remember in the movies, I was 23, I was still a virgin at age 23. I wasn't close. Spoiler alert, 18-year-old me didn't get it. Didn't get anywhere. Woe is me. But Matthew McConaughey's Palmer Joss, Jodie Foster's Ellie Arroway in the movie Contact, they meet, they have about 20 seconds of, how you doing? All right. And then we cut to, they just had sex. You get to see McConaughey's abs, very impressive. Jodie is hurriedly putting her clothes on. And I remember thinking to myself, geez, didn't they skipped over a lot of stuff here. And as I was thinking that, I was almost laughing. And some wise ass behind me goes, wow, that was a great first date. And the entire audience cracked up. That is a great movie moment within a theater where we were all into the film, but we took time out to crack up at the guy saying, wow, that was a great first date. So I don't know what I was imagining was going to happen if I simply said hello, but it was too much for me. So while I was spiraling downward, I mean, my grades sucked. How much further could I spiral downward? But I had set goal for myself. I need to give myself an opportunity here. I could not overcome the fear. And even seeing the therapist, he was telling me, you got to move slow. You have to be focused on your breathing. He was giving me good advice, but I was just so caught up in my own BS and I was stuck in my own head. So while that was going on, while I was attempting to make some communication, she was in my last period class, contemporary media. She sat about 15 feet to my right. There were innumerable opportunities to just say, hi, how you doing? How do you think you did on the test? Hey, I was going to go see White Men Can't Jump on Friday. You want to meet me at the theater? Anything would have been better than nothing. Because as much as I was a crank and I kind of dragged myself deservedly, I was not going to say anything stupid. By that, I mean, I was not going to humiliate myself in terms of how I would speak to her. I was not going to be nasty or angry. I just wanted to be able to say hello, and I couldn't do it. I was not able to do it. While all of that was going on, as I was stressing and fretting and beating myself up emotionally and psychologically every day, raging at the forces within that were making me feel this way. Happens to a lot of other people, though. I wasn't the only one. And I learned that later when I was in my 20s, my late 20s. It made me feel a little bit better. But I needed more practice. And what I did was I essentially threw myself into the fire when I wasn't ready. And I just thought it was that I was a coward. No, I wasn't a coward. I had issues, but I wasn't a coward. My body chemistry was fucked up, and I needed either drugs, which I wasn't going to take, or I needed practice to slowly, it's like building a tolerance. Instead of having a nervous reaction of 10 where you feel like you are going to die, with practice, it will lower, and it will lower to a manageable level. Where you will be able to say, hey, nice to see you. I heard you went to that party Saturday night. Was it fun? Anything is better than nothing. While that was going on, my life at home deteriorated massively. My mother's boyfriend was behaving in a way that was, well, it was unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. The guy had nothing to say to me, and he acted as if he did. So there are times where a significant other in a parent's life can be a father figure, a mother figure, or something constructive or helpful. But when you're just an asshole, when you're just vindictive and nasty, that's not the same thing. And this guy was just an awful person. And my inability to do anything other than absorb this incessant abusive behavior, that's something I still have to live with. I was a kid. I was 18. And yeah, I was a big kid. But I just didn't have the wherewithal to do anything about it. I didn't have the wherewithal to stand my ground. And in this instance, when I say that, I mean just in terms of be on even footing with somebody who is attempting to exert authority over you, someone who does not have any authority over you. Zero, nothing. You got nothing to say to me. Well, the problem is, I can say that, and I had moments where I did impart as nicely as I possibly could muster. You don't have anything to say to me. You're not even living here. Leave me alone. I'll leave you alone. That's all. But that wasn't good enough for him. He staged what amounted to a coordinated effort to get me out of the house. And if I did not leave of my own free will, he was going to figure out a way to get me out of the house anyway. Honestly, I was more focused on the girl. Because home life had been shit for a couple of years anyway, just not as bad as this. Not as bad as wondering when I came home what was going to await me. Was I going to get screamed at? Was I going to be threatened with I don't know what? What was going to happen? Well, I did come home one day, and I found my room trashed. And some of my, excuse me for saying this, some of my somewhat prized bowling trophies destroyed. When I saw that, I had a bad temper. In this instance, I am my grandfather's grandson. In this case, I don't mean the calm, steely-eyed Grandpa Nat, my dad's dad, who was as tough as nails, but he was not a guy who was known for a horrible temper. My mom's father, the mobster, Grandpa Barron, who had recently passed. No, I got his hair-trigger temper. When I came home and realized that this motherfucker, this piece of crap, had destroyed my room, trashed it, I calculated in my head, he wasn't home, there wasn't anybody there. I calculated in my head, I was smart enough at 18 already. So if I take a baseball bat and I brain this guy, no jury's going to convict me. I'm okay with it. The little voice, you might ruin the rest of your life. You know what? I don't give a shit. This is not okay. There's no version of this that is acceptable in any way, unless I did something like that to him. That's different. That's different. If I make aggressive, posturing, unreasonable requests or if I fuck with his stuff, all bets are off. Tit for tat. No problem. But I was aggressed upon. I was attacked. I didn't do anything to bring that on. Well, you should have cleaned your room. Hey, fuck you. Shut your fuck. What the hell are you talking about? I know adults where their rooms are disasters. Do you know how many offices of accountants I went in my life and have gone into that were worse than whatever my room looked like at that time? I could never figure out how half of the CPAs I knew could ever find anything because the clutter was like TV show reality level. Hoarders. Okay, so don't give me any of this shit. None of your business. Keep your mouth shut. Just leave me alone. Not good enough. So needless to say, in this particular instance, although I had my Louisville Slugger in hand, didn't end up using it. Cooler heads prevailed. Two of my friends talked me down from the ledge. Don't do it. Don't even think about it. Fine. Things continued to go downhill and get worse. Cuts the power, throws out food that I had bought. Basically playing mind games, psychological warfare. Now, I was not going to succeed as far as the young lady went. I just didn't have the wherewithal. I had needed practice before any of that started. I didn't get any because I was so caught up in my own head and my own nonsense. But what was going on here was not nonsense. This was real. And there are countless. Now, I even knew people who went through similar things, went through similar disasters of a new person in their one parent or the other parent's life, and that person is treacherous. It happens. But when it was happening to me, I wasn't thinking other people are going through this because it didn't really matter in that moment. What mattered was I was in jeopardy. I didn't understand that I was actually in a precarious, dangerous situation. But here's where it becomes more problematic. Because in said potentially precarious or dangerous situation, under normal circumstances when we're adults, what do our therapists tell us? What would rational other people say? Get out, like the movie, get out of the situation. This is a house where I was born. This is where I grew up. That motherfucker, that piece of shit, he has to go. Fuck him. Why do I have to go? Well, I could say that. That sounds good. But in the real world, at least in the real world of 1992, the first half, information traveled slow. Nowadays, a kid like me who was clever and smart, if he had his wits about him, would have been live streaming, live blogging, and this guy would have ended up having to take a hike because he would have been humiliated when the bullshit that he was pulling was posted all over for other people to see. Didn't have that in 1992. Wasn't so easy. I had a camcorder, but it's just not the same. Nowadays, if somebody does something like that to a kid in my position, it's not going to go more than a couple of weeks and he's going to be out on his ass. Not the kid. But in this case, because it was 1992, because I was a particular kind of kid and he was a particular kind of personality, he got away with it. Got away with it. He got away with horrendous behavior after horrendous behavior. And I just sat there when I was, allowed to just exist and not get barked at. I sat there and I took it. And I raged and I seethed about everything else. My grades sucked. I was going to be going to Nassau Community. I didn't have a driver's license yet, even though I was 18. Wasn't going to get the girl. Everything swirling, and it just felt like I was being pressed and pushed down. So ultimately, as I was graduating from Massapequa High School, June 28, 1992, not long after that, and I was working for my dad's accounting firm, and I had been spending, weekends with dad. That was normal stuff, though, going back for a number of years. My sister, same thing. But I returned home one day to find that my key no longer worked. I'd been locked out of the house, and all of the shit, half of it had been destroyed, but all of my stuff was on the front lawn. Again, this is the kind of thing that is not happening now, because the person who did it would probably be arrested. At the very least, they would be publicly shamed and humiliated. But here, there's my stuff, more broken stuff. I didn't really need any of it anyway, but more broken stuff. Key doesn't work. A gigantic fuck you. And that was that. Went to go live with my dad, which was where I needed to be, but it shouldn't have been. And that's the point. When somebody says, or somebody looks back and says, yeah, that was the best thing, it was the best thing. Because the alternative was that one of us was going to die. There's no version of reality in which it should ever come to that. There's no good, there was no positive there. what happened was not okay. It was completely disgraceful, unacceptable. And here I am, 32 years later, and I'm still pissed off that I got done that dirty. It's never going to be okay. You know, we can all forgive, but we don't forget. And I didn't get the girl. No shit. I wasn't going to get the girl anyway. The time meant that we were going to go our separate ways. This was not the kind of story you hear now, which is a good thing, as far as people who never quite got together in high school, and because they are on Facebook, message boards, Massapequa High School class of 1990, whatever it is, stay in touch and things happen in a good sense. Didn't work out that way. Moved in with my dad and prepared for first semester of college after I had graduated in like the bottom third of my class. You want to talk about disgraceful? Like, that's legitimately unacceptable that a kid like me would do that badly in school. But I just didn't care. I was so angry all the time. And I actually did better in 12th grade than I had in either 10th or 11th. I was so aggravated, but I was focused, and having the crush on that girl meant that I was going to go to school. Because if I didn't go to school, I couldn't see her. And I couldn't imagine maybe I'll actually talk to her. No. Head was in the right place, though. I did a little bit of work. I had a couple of classes. I actually performed admirably. That contemporary media class ended up getting an A. But I was preparing for Nassau Community College. NYU was not even a thought. I would have probably gotten arrested myself for daring to apply to a school like New York University, graduating 363rd out of a class of 540. I think it ended up being even worse than that. 1992 overall was a horrible year because my relationship with my mother was temporarily fractured, and there was a chance that it was going to be permanently fractured. Well, there but for the grace of God, you reach a point where you realize you only have one mother and one father. In the overwhelming majority of cases, and I don't mean to impugn people who have had very important, where they maybe had a stepfather or a stepmother who was more father or mother to them than their birth mother. I do not in any way mean to impugn you. I should have said, in most cases, people that I know of, you get one of each. And even if bad things happen, even if you're aggravated, you're still angry about something, you still have to try, I believe. You still have to try to make it work. And we did. We did. It wasn't overnight, but we did. But that's not 1992. That's going forward. My first semester at Nassau Community, without a driver's license, having to the 1992 version of walking backwards naked uphill in snow every day to school. Well, in my case, it was that I had to walk across, Dad and I were living in Woodbury at what is now called Eagle Rock, across the street from the movie theater, which is now the Equinox, right off Route 135 Jericho Turnpike. I had to walk to Crossways Park, which is the old Cablevision headquarters, it's still there, and I had to catch the bus from the other side of the Cablevision headquarters on Woodbury Road. It was a 30-minute walk from home to the bus and then take the bus to Nassau. It sucked. It was horrible. And I was still pissed off about the fact that I had been thrown out of the house in Massapequa. And I could not accept the fact that I had blown whatever chance I may have had. And maybe I didn't have any chance, but I had an opportunity to at least make a connection. Because not every connection has to be a love connection like the old TV show with Chuck Woolery. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes there are people who are put in your path and you're supposed to be friends with them. It may have ended up being that, but we'll never know what could have happened because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for what happened with my mom's boyfriend. And I wasn't ready for a semester of college walking 30 minutes to the bus, 30 minutes home from the bus, and then a 45-minute bus ride to school every day in that first semester. I wasn't ready for any of that. I don't know that that was necessarily the worst year of my life. But if it wasn't, it's in the bottom three. I had a lot of bad years. But I also, as I pointed out in another podcast, as horrible as that was, I had the safety net that I at least had the opportunity to move in with my father. If my mom had been a single mom and the same scenario had played out, I'll tell you one thing we know for sure, I wouldn't be here right now. I might be somewhere else. I'm not saying I'd be, with the East River, but I definitely would not be here. I would not have graduated any college, and I sure as fuck wouldn't have gone to New York University, and I would not have gotten to hear Bill Cosby's commencement address with the class of 1997. How come you all stopped cheering? Great moments of history. Bill Cosby, when we quieted down too quickly as he was getting ready to give his commencement remarks. How come you all stopped cheering? That got a big laugh. Very little good happened in the year 1992. My thinking began to shift, and there were events which took place which I could not have foreseen at the beginning of the year. I never would have imagined that I was going to be thrown out of that house. I mean, look, if I had been a kid, could have been a drug user, something horrendous like that, that's also different. But this was a situation of people butting heads and me not having the wherewithal to stand up for myself and allowing myself to get manipulated and fucked with. It happened that way. Very little good happened that year, other than the fact that I did graduate from Massapequa High School. I did form a few friendships that were new friendships, but the one that I wanted didn't happen. Didn't really reconnect with the object of my affection until 2 decades later at the reunion. And I do feel that her and I were just supposed to be friends. But it's still, when you're young, when you're 18 and you struggle with interpersonal connection, anything is better than nothing, as I keep saying. And that phrase applies to a lot of different things. One hell of a year. In 1 year, so many things happened which were negative. And I used to really get down on myself for not being strong, for being weak, for being cowardly. But I can say the fact that I did survive, just because I had my father, yes, but it took something to continue to push forward when I didn't want to. When I was, maybe I shouldn't even go to college. What's the point? Because I always had that attitude of what's the point? But soldiering on, marching forward, it seemed a little out of character. But as it turned out, it wasn't. Because I actually was experiencing some personal growth. I was building character. Didn't realize it. Didn't know it at the time. But looking back on it, it seems pretty obvious. I made a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes of omission. Things that could have been handled better. Things I wish had been handled better, but weren't. But at the end of 1992, at least I knew that I could get reasonably good grades. Maybe I could have at least somewhat of the future that everyone in the family always told me how smart I was. Maybe I could get something done. Maybe academically I'm not going to be a disaster. Maybe I'm going to actually live up to my theoretical potential, do some good work in college, and maybe end up at a 4-year university. That's a story for another day. Episode 194, we're going to call it 1992, One Hell of a Year. If you caught this one on the YouTube channel and haven't done so already and enjoyed it, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, you know the drill. Click like, subscribe, share, turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 195, maybe about movies, or maybe more life stories, which are going to kind of seem like life lessons as we go along, because I sure learned an awful lot while these disastrous things were taking place. Sometimes when we're at the bottom, we pull ourselves up, we say, son of a bitch, I'm still here, damn it. Peace.